Welcome back to the Chaotic 10. I'm Chaotic, and today we're covering the top 10 reasons game controllers evolve. Necessity. Nintendo is the prime example here, starting with the original Nintendo controller, which added one more button to the original Atari controller. The Super Nintendo added 2 more buttons. You see where I'm going. As games got more complex, it was a no-brainer that everyone in the industry had to start adding buttons. The addition of buttons gave the user more options with their character, jumping, shooting, spin dash, so on. Once games became more advanced and added a Z-axis and polygons, the need for a controller to control that dimension was needed. The 64 controller added a Z-axis controller on top of an XY axis controller. Ever wonder why you had that third leg? Well, it was because Nintendo was unsure whether or not polygons would take off or was just a gimmick at the time. So they stuck with what they knew, refining it into the GameCube and turning it into a more compact system. Natural evolution. Natural evolution is where gaming companies do their research on what customers like and develop a controller based on that feedback, and then don't make a single change until everybody else is doing it. The play it safe card. The PlayStation controllers are the perfect example here. The PlayStation, the PSX, PS2, PS3, PS4 controllers have very little changes between them, other than to accommodate for modern games. And they don't really need to. Gamers have come to know and love that style of controller, and to change anything now without the necessity behind it would just be fruitless for all parties involved. Scandal. Obviously the top of the scandal list here is Microsoft, and you really can't blame them. They are the youngest entry in the gaming market.
If I may, I'll tell you the problem with the scientific power that you're using here. It didn't require any discipline to attain it. You know, you read what others had done, and you took the next step. You didn't earn the knowledge for yourselves, so you don't take any responsibility for it. You stood on the shoulders of geniuses to accomplish something as fast as you could, and before you even knew what you had, you patented it and packaged it and slapped it on a plastic lunchbox, and now you're selling it.
But they're willing to spend a lot of money to make you love them. The first Xbox controller was a brick. It was a friggin' train wreck, awkward to hold, awful, but they did listen to your feedback, something Sega could have learned from, and came out with a slimmer controller to fit in with the other popular kids. Experimental. Sega was known for being experimental, not just with their consoles or games, but with their controllers as well. They were also known for standing by their experiments no matter what, which is why we didn't see a regular controller for the Dreamcast or Saturn, which may or may not have contributed to the fall of Sega, but with one controller looking like a spaceship and the other one shaped like a Walkman, it was really hard to find out what Sega was going for. Experimental controllers are normally made when they're trying to stay ahead of industry trends, and that's why Sega is the prime culprit, but not the only. In fact, there are a lot of controllers that were experimental that worked, like Nintendo's Wiimote, which drove industry trends. So you can't blame Sega for trying, but for real though, the digipad on the inside of the Dreamcast controller? Whose dumb idea was that? Copycat controllers. So the PC crowd has never really had a controller of its own, and it doesn't really need one because it has a keyboard and mouse. Way more buttons, better Z-axis control, but that doesn't stop third-party development on controllers for those whiny enough to not be able to use a keyboard properly. Those controls are normally based off the natural evolution controllers, so essentially you'll be playing with a PlayStation controller. Almost every single controller that PC support is based around the PSX model, and before that it was the Super Nintendo controller. Because there is no real need for controllers on computers, the third-party developers choose what is trendy and directly copy them and then release them to GameStop and Walmart. Emulation. The third member in the family of handheld controllers, this type also evolved from arcades and then to the Atari joystick controller, but instead of moving into thumb pads, they stuck with the joystick, evolving with more buttons based around the stick, making them perfect for simulation games such as Advanced Tactical Fighters and other flight sims. Once racing games hit the scene, this family broke off into simulations of wheels and eventually mirroring the entire interior of a car. Future chasing and the touchscreen controller generation. Ever since ever, People have tried chasing the future. Fantastic stories of people being able to control technology with a touch of their voice, which makes developers want to get in on that action. As our technology increases, we get closer and closer to achieving a Minority Report or Tony Stark level interface, but until then, expect more of this crap. Steam, I would say I expect better from you, but I really don't. One-off game-specific controllers. Believe it or not, these things are actually evolutions of Gamepads, but obviously your immersion into the game doesn't happen if you're playing these games through a regular controller. It's hard to think that you're Freddie Mercury singing into an Xbox controller. So they design one-offs that are born out of necessity but don't carry over, making them, in fact, one-offs. Frankenstein controllers. Frankenstein controllers happen all the time and are easily written off as copycat controllers if they're good, but if they're bad, they turn into an abomination that no one really wants to play. In fact, we should probably burn it with fire. Thus was the life of the Gravis controller gamepad. This thing was part Super Nintendo controller, part Namco Neo, and part joystick for those super awesome 90s simulator games. Had a little stick that you screwed into the thumb pad, and it easily broke off and caused blood pouring out of your fingers. Gamepads. Gamepads are the cousins of the mainstream controllers. They have evolved over time in the same manner as already described, but just with a different family. But they all share the same ancestor, arcade machines. Going from arcades to the Atari controller to the multi-button to eventually this monstrosity, making them ideal for fighting games. Thanks guys for watching my video. If you liked what you heard, make sure you comment, subscribe, and share.